Hello and welcome back while I read Chapter 12 of School Story by Andrew Clements, and it's called In or Out. Now that a grown-up was involved, Natalie felt better about everything. Zoe didn't seem quite as insane, and it was exciting that Mrs. Clayton liked her book. Natalie felt that she could write again, so for the rest of the week she wrote for 2 hours every night, and then she worked all afternoon on both Saturday and Sunday. It turned out that all the story needed was 3 more chapters, and by Sunday night, her book was done. Riding into the city on Monday morning, her mom said, "We didn't get to spend much time together this weekend, Nat, and you look so tired. Is it my imagination, or do you have a lot more homework lately?" Natalie smiled and said, "Yeah, there's more homework, but I'm also doing some creative writing. That's why I've been so busy." "Creative writing for your English class?" Natalie paused and then said, "Well, sort of. Sometimes I think your English teacher goes overboard with the work. I mean, she's good and her comments on your assignments are excellent, but still, kids shouldn't have to slave every second. I'm sorry I didn't get to your open house so I could have met her. I have half a mind to call her and tell her to lay off every once in a while." Natalie shook her head. "No, it's not like that, Mom. This writing, it's mostly something I've been working on my own." Her mom smiled. "Well, I'm glad you enjoy writing, but you really need to get enough rest. And if you have enough time to go shopping with me or to the movies now and then, that'd be nice too." Natalie smiled back. "Sorry, Mom. Next weekend will be different, I promise." When the publishing club met in the Linden room on Monday afternoon, Natalie had a finished manuscript to Zoe and another one to Miss Clayton. Blushing a little, she said, "I finished the book. You'll have to read it and see if the ending's any good." Zoe hugged the stack of papers and said, "I can't wait." Miss Clayton beamed and said, "Neither can I. I'm sure it's going to be great, Natalie." And when they met again early Tuesday morning, everyone agreed that the ending was perfect. The book was done, and it was time to send it to the publisher. Now that the manuscript was ready, Zoe put her plan into high gear. At the end of English class on Tuesday afternoon, Zoe handed Miss Clayton a big brown envelope. During her free period, Miss Clayton opened it. There was a neatly typed letter from Zoe, and when she opened a separate, smaller envelope, she let out a gasp. The envelope contained $500 in cash. Miss Clayton began reading Zoe's letter. "Dear Miss Clayton, first of all, don't get scared about the other envelope. I know it's a lot of money, but it's all mine from birthdays and holidays, and I can spend it any way I want to. It's really mine, so don't worry about that. Here's what we need to do." As Miss Clayton and Zoe detailed instructions, as Miss Clayton read Zoe's detailed instructions, her eyes got wider and wider. Mr. Archer, the headmaster, happened to walk past the open doorway of the Linden room as Miss Clayton was reading the second page of Zoe's letter. He stopped and took a step into the room. "Laura," he said. Miss Clayton jerked her head up and saw Mr. Archer and then slapped Zoe's letter face down onto the envelope of money. Mr. Archer looked concerned. He said, "Is everything all right?" All right," stammered Miss Clayton. Oh, yes, everything's fine. I'm just getting ready for my last class." Mr. Archer smiled. "Sorry to startle you, but you looked as if you'd seen a ghost." Mrs. Clayton's laugh was forced and a little too shrill. "A ghost? Oh no, I'm just a little tired, that's all. I'm fine, really, just fine." "Well, good. I'm glad you're fine." Mr. Archer started to turn and then stopped and said, "Oh, I've been meaning to remind you. We need to talk to someone this week to set up another classroom observation. I'll put a note in your mailbox, all right?" Miss Clayton nodded. "That'll be fine. Thanks, Arthur." Mr. Archer left, and Miss Clayton turned the letter over and finished reading it. Then she went to the intercom by the door and called the office. "Yes, what is it?" The tinny speaker made secretary's voice sound even more nasal and harsh than it did in person. Mrs. Frachey had been the dearie school since the days that all the letters were typed on manual typewriter and all the great reports were written in hand. Of all the staff of the school, Mrs. Frachey was the only one that Miss Clayton hadn't learned to call by her first name, which was Edna. Mrs. Frachey, this is Laura Clayton. I already know that. What is it, Miss Clayton? Miss Frachey didn't believe in calling anyone Ms. To her, a woman was either a Miss or a Mrs. Mrs. Frachey, would you please ask Zoe Reisman to stop in and see me after school today? Do you have her schedule? No, but I know she's in gym this period. Very well. I'll try to message her. Thank you, Mrs. Frachey. There was no response. Mrs. Frachey didn't believe in saying, you're welcome either. When Zoe showed up at the Linden room after school, Miss Clayton didn't mince words. She held up Zoe's letter and the envelope of the money and said, Listen, Zoe, I just don't feel right about this. You're asking me to go and spend a lot of money. You want me to rent an office and hire a receptionist and everything else. And I just don't know. Where will all of this end up? Zoe was unmoved. Where will it end up? With Natalie's book getting published, that's where. And we're not really renting an office. Did you really read my whole letter? We're just going to one of those instant office places. We pay $350, and for that we get to use their mailing address. And we get our own phone number, and a fax number, and an answer machine. And if someone calls during business hours, the reception lady answers the phone and says, Sherry Clutch Literacy Agency. Sherry Clutch Literary Agency. May I help you? We only have to pay for a month at a time, and none of this is wrong. People do this all the time when they want to go into business. If I was old enough, I could do it myself, but I'm not. So that's the part that you have to do. Miss Clayton felt trapped. She imagined herself having to explain all this to Mr. Archer. She saw herself sitting in a heavy chair in the oak-paneled boardroom of the 5th floor facing all the sober, frowning trustees of the Deary School. She imagined being charged with unprofessional behavior and never being able to teach again. She gave a little smile and said, I know what you're asking me to do, Zoe, but I'd feel so much better if I could talk to your parents about it. In fact, don't you think you should ask them to help you do all this? Why not get them involved? Zoe pressed her lips together. I'm not getting my parents involved because when you get parents involved, they take over. At least that's what mine would do. This is something that Natalie and I want to do on our own. If we got our dad or my mom into it, then it wouldn't be like doing it ourselves. That's all. It just wouldn't be. And we came to you because you're nice and smart. Zoe paused for about 5 seconds and then she said, but if you don't want to be our advisor, it's okay. Natalie thought that you would be the best one, and so did I. But if you don't think you can help us, then I guess we'll have to ask someone else. Zoe paused again and then said, I think Mr. Carswell might help us, don't you? Miss Clayton saw that what Zoe was doing. Zoe was calling her a coward, and she was saying that Mr. Carswell wouldn't be. And Zoe was probably right. Mr. Carswell taught social studies. He had been at the school for about 5 years, and he had a reputation for being sort of a rebel. He was the editor of the school newspaper and coached the varsity soccer team. He was always bursting with energy, and he ran in the New York Marathon every fall. And last summer, he had paddled his kayak up the Hudson River all the way to the Adirondack Mountains. And on top of all that, he was good looking. Sooner or later, every girl at the Deary School got a crush on Mr. Carswell, even Miss Clayton. Miss Clayton blushed. Zoe had cut off every possible escape. If she backed out now, she would brand herself a coward. And she was not a coward. Even if she had never run a marathon. Miss Clayton was learning the same lesson that Zoe's older sisters had learned years ago. To argue is to lose. 45 minutes later, Laura Clayton was sitting at a small desk in the reception area of Offices Unlimited filling out paperwork. That part of the form was simple. It was all simple, just like Zoe said it would be. Zoe had done her research very well. Then Miss Clayton checked off the services that Zoe had asked for. There was a lot of fine print at the bottom of the form and then a line for a signature. Laura paused, then took a deep breath, signed the sheet, and stood up and handed it across the counter to the office manager. The young woman calculated the first month's rent, then looked up and said, "That'll be $347.75. How will you be paying today?" Laura opened her purse and started to reach for Zoe's cash, then had a flash of inspiration. Instead of Zoe's money, she grabbed her own billfold, opened it, and pulled out her MasterCard. She handed it to the lady. "I'll be using this, thanks." Instantly, Miss Clayton felt so much better. Maybe helping the girls was a crazy idea, and maybe she shouldn't be doing it at all, but at least she could keep every bit of Zoe's cash safe and sound. No one would be able to accuse her of wasting the money of a poor, defenseless child. Thinking of Zoe as a poor, defenseless child almost made Miss Clayton burst out laughing. 3 minutes later, the office manager handed Miss Clayton 4 things: a small black beeper, a sheet that listed the new phone number, the new fax number, and the mailing address, a separate sheet that told how to record your company's outgoing voicemail message, how to call and retrieve your voicemail, and how to use your beeper. The 4th thing she gave Miss Clayton was a receipt for the payment. Offices Unlimited was on Upper Broadway, only about 5 blocks from Miss Clayton's apartment. So, on her way home, she stood at her bank and opened a new savings account. She deposited $347.75 of Zoe's cash. Miss Clayton tucked the new passbook into the bottom of her purse. Then she put the receipt for the office in the envelope with the leftover money. That way, when she gave Zoe the envelope, it would look like she had used the cash to pay for the office. Walking up Broadway with a spring in her step, Miss Clayton felt alive and energized. The smell of pizza mixed with the exhaust from the 104 bus and the streetlights seemed bright and cheery in the gathering dusk. As she turned right onto 98th Street, Miss Clayton thought about what she'd just done. The office, the money, the beeper, the new savings account. And she smiled. She was glad she hadn't sent Zoe and Natalie looking for another advisor. She thought, I did it. I did it. The Sherry Clutch Literary Agency is ready for action. I am Miss Clayton the Fearless, Miss Clayton the Bold. Then after another 10 steps, she thought, yeah, right, who am I kidding? I'm the slightly wacky Miss Clayton. That's who I am. But whatever happens, I'm going to be right in the middle of it. And it's going to be an adventure. That's it for chapter 12 of School Story. I hope you join me again for chapters 13 on, and on until the end of the book. Thank you so much for reading along with me. Have a wonderful day.